Well, hi everybody, and welcome to this SOLAS conversation. In previous SOLAS conversations, Andy Bannister has sat down and interviewed a well-known author. But on this occasion, we are turning the tables because Andy's not the interviewer, he is the author, because he has got a new book coming out very, very shortly. Well, what happens towards the end of last year is Andy disappeared and we couldn't get hold of him anywhere. His family probably couldn't find him, but he emerged from his dungeon clutching this manuscript, and a new book will be with us shortly. Andy, how are you?
I'm doing well. You know, after having come out of living in a cave for months writing the book, I am now, you know, the vitamin supplements are working, and I'm now able to actually go out into the sunlight without melting. So yeah, this is it's been a good few months.
And you're zooming into us from snowy Dundee this February.
Snowy Dundee,
right?
yeah. We get this is amazing. This morning we had a whole 2 millimeters of snow on my side of the city. So my kids were like, "Daddy, we're going to go tobogganing." It's like, no, school. And secondly, you're not tobogganing in that. But, you know, there we are.
Marvelous. So tell us then a little about this book that you have come and you've written. Tell us what it's called. The question is a title. So tell us the title of the book and why this is a question that you have set out to answer.
So the title of the book, Gavin, it's called "Do Muslims and Christians Worship the Same God?" And so in one sense, it does exactly what it says on the tin. And the backstory to the book is twofold, really. Firstly, anyone who's followed my work at all will know that, you know, engaging with Muslims has been a big part of my interest over the years. I'm unusual as a Christian writer and philosopher. My PhD was actually in Islamic studies, not biblical studies. So I've been thinking about and engaging with Muslims for years. But then the real seed for the book, Gavin, came in towards the end of my time in Canada, because I was in Canada before Scotland, around sort of 2014, 2015. There was a bit of a controversy because a professor at a well-known American theological college popped up all over the media and began announcing that she thought that Christians and Muslims worship the same God, and others got in the same act, and that really became kind of part of the zeitgeist. And so a friend of mine in Chicago rang me up in Toronto and said, "Would you come down and do a session for us, a seminar on do Muslims and Christians worship the same God?" And I remember saying to KJ, I said, is anyone really going to come? I mean, is that really is that not a more interesting topic, like you know, the use of the semicolon in Serbo-Croat in the 18th century or something? And he went, no, we really think people will come. We think we might get 100 people for this seminar. Well, Americans are not known for their understatements, but he was, because we didn't get 100, we got 600. And people packed in. I was like, oh, hello, this is an interesting topic. And since that day, whenever I've traveled around doing seminars and conferences, Gavin, whenever this has been one of the topics on offer, it's been the biggest one. So here in the UK, I've done seminars based on this material at Keswick Convention, Spring Harvest, other kind of places. And it's always the most popular one. It's the one where the stewards have to put extra seats out. It's the one where there's, you know, much more engagement. And so finally I thought, you know, I need to write the book on this, not least because there's more to this question than I could say in a 50-minute seminar. So when lockdown happened, I was like, well, okay, I've got a bit more time on my hands because I'm not traveling everywhere. I took the plunge and got writing. And the result is Do Muslims and Christians Worship the Same God? And it's out with IVP on the 18th of March in the UK, a few weeks later in the USA and Canada.
Marvelous. Now, this is your third book. And who's it aimed at? And the reason I'm asking that is because your first book was very academic, you know, an oral formulaic study of the Quran. And for understanding that, you probably needed a working knowledge of classical Arabic. And your second book, The Atheist Who Didn't Exist, is popular level, and you needed a kind of a working sense of humor. They're very, very different. So where's your third book being pitched? And that kind of level? Is it a peer-reviewed academic piece?
I'm slightly offended, Gavin, that you think that first book was academic. I mean, it has sold all of 250 copies, largely into libraries, but I'm still waiting for the movie rights to go. I still think they can make a great movie out of that book.
£38 on Amazon, your first book, I have to say. That's probably why.
It was more than that before they did the paperback, but there we go. No, so this book, really, I was going to say, it's designed to be popular. So for folks who enjoyed The Atheist Who Didn't Exist, especially the comedy and the footnotes, this has a lot of that. So I'm hoping it's a funny book, that it's accessible. It discusses some big ideas, but in a way that people can engage with. At the same time, I hope it's respectful, because I wanted to be read by both Christians and by my Muslims. So it's aimed very much at people who haven't got a Christian faith, either because they are Muslims or because they have no faith at all. But I'm also very conscious that the way that book buying works, there'll be Christians who'll be buying this. And I say to Christians buying this, buy 2 copies. Buy one for yourself, it'll be a great resource, and then buy one to give to a non-Christian friend, because it's the perfect gift for a non-Christian, for a non-Christian, or particularly for a Muslim. And it's the kind of thing as a Christian you could give as a gift and say, look, I think you'll probably disagree with some of this, but have a read, tell me what you think, and I hope it will start conversations. And that's what the Atheists Didn't Exist did. It started conversations between Christians and atheists. And I'm hoping this will start conversations between Christians and Muslims.
Now, I was very grateful because you sent me an advanced copy, so I have seen the manuscript, even though it's not published yet. So what if we could probe into a few of the chapters of the book to give people something of a flavor of the kind of things that you're getting into? So one of the things that I thought was particularly interesting was you suggest that there are 4 questions that are worth sort of exploring when people from different religions or different worldviews are exploring each other's kind of worldview, how they see things. And those questions are, who is God? Who are we? What's gone wrong, and what's the solution? So tell us why you settled on those 4 questions and why they're helpful in sort of opening up the most profound conversations between people coming from different worlds.
Great. Well, one of the problems is, Gavin, of course, we live in a culture where we share the public square with people of all faiths and none and different belief systems. And the problem is that sometimes we can get a bit sloppy. We tend to assume that everyone means the same things by the same words as we do. So somebody says God, we assume they mean the same thing as we do, but that's not necessarily the case. And we assume that we tend to assume other people see the world the same way that we do, and that's not the case. And I think one of the reasons we have such a hostile public square right now is people have forgotten how to talk to each other. So there are various sets of questions that folks have suggested across the years that are great conversation starters. So those ones that I use, they're not totally unique to me. I've taken work that's been done by others, kind of refined it, polished it, and modified it slightly. And what I find, those 4 questions are a great way to navigate through a conversation with anybody, whether they're an atheist or a Hindu or a Buddhist or a Muslim. I mean, that first question, it's not just, is there a God? It's, what is God like? So, because obviously our atheist friends will say, well, there is no God. And that's okay. Well, you can move on to the second question. But of course, our Muslim friends, or perhaps if we're talking to somebody who's a Hindu, you might say, well, of course I believe in a divine realm. Well, then you'd want to go, well, tell me more about that. And then you can listen and as a Christian and probe more. And in time, you can share what you believe as a Christian. It's a very helpful question. That second question is fascinating because that question everybody has to have an answer to. If you're dealing with an atheist, they've got to think about what it means to be human. Are we just atoms and particles? Are we more than that? And the different faith traditions of the world have some very different ideas about what it means to be a human being. And then those last 2 questions, what's gone wrong with the world? Everybody thinks that something has gone wrong with the world. I have never met anybody who says, oh, the world is perfect. There are no problems. Everybody thinks something has gone wrong with the world, or several things. And that's a fascinating conversation. And then, of course, what's the solution? And those 4 questions, they're designed to get people talking. They're designed to get people listening. And for Christian readers of the book, they're designed to really get you to begin plugging into the things that really make your friends who are not Christians tick, so you can understand where they are, their mind and their heart and things. And for those who are reading the book who are not Christians, hopefully those questions will get maybe them thinking for the first time about what they actually believe. And while I'm recording this, Gavin, right now, well, not right now, but shortly after I record this, I'm teaching an online session. I'm teaching an online course at the University of Toronto this term. And one of the exercises we give the Christian students on that class is we give them those questions and we say, go and find a friend who's not a Christian. They can be an atheist, a humanist, a Buddhist, a Hindu, whatever, and go and use those questions as the basis for a conversation. Interview them about what they believe. Write that interview up and show it to them. Make sure they agree that you've summarized it well, and then submit that as a piece of coursework. And every year we've done that, students have loved it because they've gone, wow, it actually got me talking to my friend who believed differently. And you know what? After we finished the assessment, we carried on talking for another 2 hours. And actually, there have been stories of students leading their friends to Christ months after those conversations began. And I think often we don't know how to start conversations about life's deepest questions. And the material in that chapter, those 4 questions, is designed to help you do that.
Oh, that's really interesting. Okay, so go straight back to the core of the thing, the book title then. If you had to answer the question in the title very, very quickly, do Christians and Muslims worship the same God? What would your answer be?
I'd be very cheeky, Gavin, and say there are 2 answers to the question, both short. The answer is both no and yes. So the no
That's very
part,
helpful. Thank
that
you.
is very helpful. I thought you'd like that. Let me
Would you care to be any less specific?
I will elaborate slightly. So there's a large chunk of no. What I mean by that question is a slightly confusing question. But I called the book that because that's the question everybody asks. If we tease the question out and we say, okay, is the God described by the Quran, the scripture of Islam, the same as the God of the Bible? I think the answer is a pretty categorical no, because both the Bible and the Quran are really concerned with the question of who is God? What are his attributes and his character and his nature and so on? And when you start putting detail in, you go, wow, it's different. You know, the God of the Bible is a God who is relational. He can be known. He's a God who is love. He's a God who is holy. He's a God who has actually suffered in the person of Jesus on the cross and more. But then you take all those same questions and apply them to the Quran, and you get a very different picture. And it ends up looking like you've got a very different identity behind the God question. So if you ask the question, is the God of the Quran, the God of the Bible the same? No. However, are some Muslims yearning for, seeking for, really striving after, looking for the God of the Bible? And I think the answer is yes. And as Christians, of course, we have good precedent for that, because in Acts 17, in the New Testament, famous story, Paul, wandering around Athens, sees all the pagan idols and altars and so forth, and then goes and preaches to the Greeks. And when he preaches to the Greek philosophers at the Areopagus there in Acts 17, he talks about this altar he's seen. And it's an altar to an unknown God. And Paul doesn't go, oh, you foolish lot, you were worshipping the wrong thing. Paul goes, you know, that God that you're worshipping, that unknown God, let me tell you who that is. And I think something similar is going on with some Muslims. When I meet Muslims who tell me they do believe in a God of love, that they do want a relationship with God that goes beyond just, you know, a God who is distant and remote and sends commands down but can never be known, I want to say to them, you know, you are so close. You are reaching out towards the God of the Bible. Come on, let me extend the hand of friendship and say, come on home and let me tell you more about who that God is. So yeah, Quran and Bible, no, different gods. Some Muslims, I think, desperately reaching out for the God of the Bible. And for them, I say it's a qualified yes.
So drawing on and sort of emphasizing some of those distinctives between the Bible and the Quran is very different than what a lot of people have been sort of familiar with, which is the idea of either, different paths up the same mountain, or the thing you draw on in the book, which is the 6 men who feel the elephant and they all come back and report something different. And each person has got a different kind of aspect of the truth. Go to tell us about the elephant. Then you put the elephant illustration in the book. Tell us about that illustration and what goes wrong with that.
I had some fun with the elephant, because it's an old story told in certain settings. When people who want to suggest that all the religions of the world are largely the same often use the parable of the elephant, and it goes like this, Gavin. The story is told of an old Indian king, centuries ago, who had 4 blind men who'd been blind from birth, brought into his throne room, and he also brought in an elephant. And they'd never met an elephant before. And he said to them, okay, go and encounter the elephant and describe it to me. And the one who describes the elephant most accurately, I'll give a 1,000 rupee reward to. And so the first blind man stumbles towards the elephant, and he arrives at the front end. He grabs hold of the trunk and announces, aha, an elephant. An elephant is like a snake. The second blind man stumbles into the side of the beast and sort of feels its side. And he goes, man, I don't know what you're talking about, dude. An elephant's like a wall. Third blind man approaches the elephant from the rear, gives a tug on the tail, goes, guys, what are you smoking? An elephant, it's like a rope, dude. It's obvious. And the fourth blind man grabs hold of one of the elephant's mighty legs, and he goes, guys, you bunch are insane. An elephant's like a tree. And they start arguing and they start squabbling, and before long fists are flying and there's a melee going on. And the king sits up there on his throne, looking down and laughing and laughing and laughing. And the idea, of course, behind the story is if the 4 blind men had, rather than disagreed with each other, and if they'd each recognized they just had a part of the elephant, then the world would be a much more harmonious place and elephants could live in peace. And so the story is told, surely if Muslims and Christians and Buddhists and Jews and Jedis and everything else could just agree that we have a part of the truth about God, we could all just get along. It's a lovely story, and you can have great fun with it. And boy, I had fun writing a sort of fairly comic version of it in the book. But there are some big problems. Problem number 1, of course, the people applying it to religion assume it's the same elephant. I mean, what would happen if at one end of the throne room we had an elephant and the other end of the throne room we had a giraffe, and the blind men actually encountered different animals? Why assume that Buddhists and Hindus and Muslims and Jews are in fact encountering the same reality? The parable almost assumes what it wants to prove, which is one problem. Second problem, of course, the king is the most arrogant person in the entire story, because there's the king sitting up there on the throne. He can see the whole elephant, and he's having a whale of a time going, look at these bunch of Egypts. And the problem is, if you're somebody who wants to apply that story to religion, it turns you into the arrogant one. The person who says all religions are the same is basically saying, well, mate, I can see the whole elephant. And these foolish Christians, these naive Jews, these crazy Buddhists and Muslims, if only they were as enlightened as I am, they would see that actually it's all the same elephant, and that their gods are identical. And so it is incredibly arrogant. And as I say, it assumes that there is similarity, which is the thing you're needing to prove, not assume at the start of the story.
Yeah. Now, there's a pushback against that, of course. I'm thinking of somebody like Miroslav Volf, whose theology was formed in the Balkans at the point where sort of the old Christendom meets Islam. I've stood on the bridge in Mostar where those two worlds meet. And it seems to be the thrust of his theology, someone who I've read a lot and, gained a lot from reading. But it does seem that his theology says we need to agree in order to live at peace. If you look at the atrocities in the Balkans, particularly what happened to Muslims there, and it says if we're going to live at peace and genuinely get on with each other, we do need to boil things down to the lowest common denominator and come up with a vision of God that we can agree on. And to emphasize distinctives is always going to drive us apart. So is this vision that you've got, which is going to sort of hold on to distinctive visions of God, going to push people apart?
I think the answer is no. And I'll explain why. I think much as like you, I respect Miroslav tremendously. I've read many of his books, found them very, very helpful. But I do think his book, Allah, a Christian Response, which is the book that you're alluding to there, is incredibly sloppily written. I genuinely say I don't know what he was thinking when he wrote that book. It's not up to his usual standards. And I say that with utmost respect for the rest of his scholarship. And let me explain why. Firstly, I think, of course, the moment you start saying we need to construct a vision of God that we can all agree on, that rather starts turning God into a human construct rather than something that's out there. And I would say God is external to us. God is something that, that we not we discover, who reveals himself to us. And if it turns out that we have very different visions of God, then, maybe we just need to decide, and we need to figure out whose is closer to reality. And in no other branch of life or thought would we go, you know what? You think one thing, I think something else. Rather than figure out which is the right answer, we harmonize them. Maybe we're trying to solve a mathematical equation together. For some reason, the kind of things we do for amusement in our lunch breaks at Solas. And, I look at this mathematical puzzle, I say the answer is 17, and you're convinced it's 30, and we start arguing, and our colleague comes in and goes, oh, guys, just split the difference, it's 25. Well, actually, all he's done now is introduce yet another potential wrong answer into the equation. There is a right answer, and either you're right, or I'm right, or we're both wrong, but we can't both be right. And I think the same thing is going on there. And you'll be careful about, harmonizing to such a degree, you actually just end up throwing truth out the window. That's the first thing. Secondly, the way that Miroslav harmonizes, he engages in some really sloppy reading of the Quran. And one of the ways he does this is he as a Christian, of course, is committed to the idea that God is a God of love. You can't get around that. That's all over the Bible. And to Miroslav's credit, he doesn't try and brush that under the table. He's committed to that belief. Well, he now turns to the Quran, and the idea that Allah is a God of love is not really a Quranic concept. The word love does turn up a couple of dozen times in the Quran. Usually it's to tell us the kind of things that Allah doesn't love. Usually the Quran tells us God does not love this, that, or the other, rather than tell us that God is a God of love. But then also many Muslim scholars have said that the word love, that we translate love into English from the Quranic Arabic, is better translated as like or approve of. God in the Quran doesn't really seem to be a God of love. Now, Miroslav realizes this, so he reads the Quran and goes, well, the great thing is, in hundreds of places in the Quran, Allah is described as a merciful God. Mercy is almost the same as love. And so therefore we can harmonize the two. And he literally, that's the way he kind of bends things. Now, not merely does that, I think, mishandle the Arabic text, I think it's also just bad theology, because mercy is not the same as love. If you're down in your kitchen tonight at 11 p.m. making a cup of cocoa and, a little mouse runs across the floor and you know that your wife dislikes mice, you could throw a shoe at it and kill the little thing. But, you're merciful. So you trap it under a bowl, piece of cardboard, take it into the garden to release it. And you've shown mercy to the rodent. I don't think you love the little mousey. You've shown, maybe you have, maybe you've got some strange thing going on that we'll discuss later. But mercy is not the same as love. You can show mercy with no love involved at all. And then lastly, Gavin, my other big issue, I think, with Miroslav is I don't think it works with the text. I don't think it works theologically, and it doesn't work practically, because if you're saying we need to believe the same thing in order for us to get on, well, presumably, Christians and Muslims can never get on with Hindus, because clearly we don't believe in the same God there. Nobody would suggest that. None of us who are believing God can get on with Buddhists, who are basically atheistic. And as for Richard Dawkins' crowd, who are atheists, there is absolutely no way in Miroslav's view of the world that Christians and atheists or Muslims and atheists could ever be friends, because we believe so differently. I, on the other hand, would want to say, do you know what? Part of a sign of a good friendship is you can have some profound disagreements. Maybe you disagree politically. Maybe you disagree theologically. Over the years, I've had some dear friends who are Muslims. I've had some dear friends who, one of my closest friends years ago was a committed atheist. We were friends. We had some great discussions at times. Sometimes we decided we just leave this topic and just go hill walking. But we were great, great friends, and we were friends despite our differences. We didn't feel we had to pretend they were the same. And I think Miroslav has this slightly strange view of friendship and relationship. And of course, if you look through the history of the Middle East, you can find examples of Muslim groups killing each other for centuries. The conflict between Sunni and Shiite, which has been long and bloody in many parts of the world, they believe in the same God. They believe in the same prophet. They believe in the same religion, yet it hasn't brought them together enough that doesn't avoid the bloodshed. And so I think Miroslav has a slightly naive view at times of how conflict actually works.
So it's better to hold on to the distinctives, but yet still love your neighbor, love your
figure
neighbor.
out how to live together with our differences.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the big questions of the 21st century.
Fascinating. Now, you do mention Jesus in the book as well, because obviously, whenever you come across a Christian view of who God is, you can't avoid the subject of Jesus. But what a lot of people find surprising is that in the Quran itself and in Islam, they have a lot to say. They think a lot about Jesus. That's surprising to a lot of people. Tell us a little bit about how that comes into your book.
Well, yeah, one of the places I come into land in the book is to say that I think what's caused confusion is that Islam has borrowed, when Islam was forming in the 600s and the 7th century, it borrowed a lot of Christian and Jewish language and terminology, such as God, in fact, but then changed the content of that language. And then later, we come along, we look at the words and go, oh, well, it must mean the same thing because the word is there, even though the meaning has changed. And the place that illustrates this is that, like, the test case that just demonstrates this beyond question really is Jesus. Because when Muhammad was preaching and teaching what became the Quran in the 7th century, he landed on the figure of Jesus. And there is material stories about Jesus that have come into the Quran from the Christian tradition. And so the Quran mentions Jesus by name about 24 times and something like that. And there's about 90 verses of the Quran that deal with him. And there are some stories there familiar to Christians. Others have come in from sort of more legendary sources. And Jesus is all over the Quran, and Muslims would say they believe in him as a prophet. They say they would hold, him as somebody who is a very important figure. But what's interesting, when you dig a little bit deeper, Gavin, into what's going on in the Quran, you see the Jesus figure there is very, very, very different. Totally different role to the role in the Bible. Totally different sort of belief system there that Muslims have attached to Jesus. And Jesus is, and I do the say in the 8th chapter of the book, it gives us a really good window into how the Quran, takes a biblical idea, or in the case of Jesus, a name, and attaches a whole different set of beliefs to them. And therefore we cannot simply assume, because the Quran says Jesus, therefore Muslims believe everything that we do. And it clearly is not the case at all.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So that's given us then a kind of a probe into some of the chapters, not all the chapters of the book, in case people are interested in the sorts of things you're getting into, some of the discussions. So drawing back slightly from the detail then, tell us what responses, because I know you've sent out a few sort of review copies of the book. People have seen some of this stuff. What have responses been like when you've been sending out copies so far?
Well, there's two ways that we've kind of tested out the material in the book, Gavin, that's been exciting. Over the years, all the material in the book, as I said, near the top of the interview, has been kind of tested in seminars and webinars and debates. So like all of it has been through Muslim ears. For example, I refined a lot of it as I've done this in dialogues and bits and pieces across the years. And in fact, it was, one of the things I discovered with dialoguing with Muslims, over the last sort of 4 or 5 years on 3 continents has been that actually the question around who is God is really important, because Muslims will often, when Muslims and Christians dialogue, will often leap straight to questions like the Trinity and who is Jesus. And I find, bringing the camera lens back and saying, whoa. Let's start with, who do we think God is? What do we think God is like? can be remarkably helpful. And actually, when you do that, I've had Muslims actually say, "Do you know what? This is a very different view of God you Christians have. I didn't totally appreciate this." And so I've had Muslims get close to the language of it's not quite the same God that we believe in. So that's been interesting. So everything in the book has been, in a sense, like tested in the white heat of those dialogues. And then I've been very encouraged, as I've actually sent out review copies and sample copies of the book, that I've had really positive engagement from all over the place. One of my most exciting ones was we got a copy of the book onto the desk of a guy called Tom Holland. And if you follow Solas at all, we're big fans of Tom Holland. Tom is not a Christian. He is probably, I don't know where he would label himself, atheist, agnostic, humanist, somewhere in that bracket. So very sympathetic to Christians. He's not an anti-Christian writer at all, but he doesn't have any Christian faith. But he has written a book on Islam, The Shadow of the Sword. And I found myself thinking, I wonder whether Tom might be willing to do an endorsement for the book. And so my publisher very cheekily just sent him a copy, and we didn't think we'd hear anything. He wrote back and loved it, and very kindly gave us a quote we can stick on the front cover. And so Tom was very positive about the book doing a great job of bringing out the differences. And now Tom's not sure what he believes about those differences, but he would definitely, I think, stand behind the idea that the book does a great job of showing that Christianity and Islam are light years from being the same. And then I've also been very encouraged by some of the comment we've also heard from the Christian community as well. So Muslims, in a sense, got the material as I did it in universities and mosques and things across North America, Australia, and the UK. Tom Holland got a review copy. And then, so someone like my friend Amy Orr Ewing, known to many in the UK, kind of brilliant Christian communicator. And she and her husband have also done quite a lot of work across the years in the Middle East. And she's someone whose comments I take very seriously, and got a lovely comment from Amy. And again, we put her on the cover as an endorsement, just in terms of the way this communicates deep ideas. And that's the goal of the book, Gavin, really, is that if you read the book, you will get your handle on some really big ideas, some really key ideas, but the book will do it in a way that is super engaging. You don't need to have any kind of sort of theological academic background, and also hopefully it does it in a way that's funny. Like the last book, it's got comedy footnotes, it's got the slightly wacky asides. We have everything from Pride and Prejudice to Doctor Who to science fiction, fantasy, and pop culture references. And if you buy the book, read the footnotes, because hopefully the footnotes will also make you go, that's really good, or that's a dad joke. Why did Andy do that?
I wondered what you'd said about the reactions from Muslims, because while I was reading it, it struck me that it was more of a challenge sometimes to kind of more liberal thought that wants to boil things together. And then a lot of Muslims would actually respect the idea of distinctive beliefs, and that there might be a positive reaction from there. So that's... Yeah,
absolutely. And I would definitely say over the years, one of the things I've loved doing is doing dialogues and discussions. And I think as a moment ago, I've done those in universities, done those in coffee shops, done those in mosques. One of my friends in the USA, his name's Abdu Murray. He's a Christian now, but 15, 16 years ago, he was a Shiite Muslim. I remember he and I doing a big dialogue in one of Toronto's biggest mosques, about 1,000 people there, 600 of whom were Muslims. And, there was he and I for the Christian side, 2 Muslims for the Muslim side. And we dialogued. It was not a debate. It was supposed to be friendly, but still bring the differences out. And boy, the differences came out. And the Muslims there had no problem with the idea that Christians and Muslims believe different things. Yes, we need to figure out how to do dialogue. And yes, it was fantastic. We had 600 Christian Muslims, 400 Christians. We had a great evening. We ate together as well as dialogue together. And I think you're right. It's more very, very sort of liberal Muslims, who are quite rare, actually, but then more sort of, I suppose, for want of a better word, Gavin, woolly Westerners, people who like the idea of spirituality but don't actually want to commit to anything. That actually the differences come out, and it comes out in other ways too. I've had sort of Hindu friends say they can't get their head around Westerners who like messing around with a little bit of yoga and a little bit of meditation stuff without buying into the whole shebang. To the Eastern mind, it looks really weird. Westerners just look like these sort of fluffy lightweights. And so I think, you do get some of that. So I hope the book will challenge. I should be careful. I'm using fluffy lightweight slightly tongue in cheek. And if you are a fluffy lightweight, feel free to respond to me and say something rude. I don't mind. And certainly to Gavin, because he can take it. But I hope it will shake people out of that complacency that these religions are just, part of some big community of Abrahamic faiths. It's nonsense, and it does a huge disrespect to Islam, and it does a huge disrespect to Christianity as well.
Okay, so very shortly the presses will start to run, the books will be published, and IVP will start sending them out to wholesalers and retailers. And what are you hoping will be achieved when these thousands of books get sent out to all parts of the world? What are you hoping that, you spent a lot of time and a lot of effort in this, you must be hoping it achieves something.
Yeah.
What are you hoping and praying for as the end result of all this?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I suppose I'm hoping I'll sell enough copies that will pay the coffee bill, because I drank a lot of cups of coffee in writing this book. So if it just broke even, that would be very exciting. Makes an author happy. Yeah, very seriously, I hope it will do two things, Gavin. I hope hopefully for Christians, it will help equip them to talk about how we navigate this world of competing religions we live in. So I think a lot of Christians are very nervous about saying things like, well, I believe that Jesus is exclusively true. And I talk in the book about the fact that I think he is exclusively true, but it's very open exclusivity. Jesus did say, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, but he also said, any who come will find. If you seek, you will find. And so, Christianity is a very open, exclusivistic faith. And I hope it will give people the language to talk about that. I hope that Christians will be able to read it, on the bus or in the workplace or at university when their friends say, hey, what are you reading? It will give them the ability to go, well, let me tell you, it's a really interesting book. And then thirdly, I hope it will find its way into the hands of lots of people who are not Christians. What excited me the most about the last book, The Atheist Didn't Exist, is it did that. And I had some wonderful stories. I mean, I remember one person sort of coming up to me at a conference and saying how, this guy, his sister was probably the, absolutely diehard atheist, kind of Marxist as well. So quite an extreme political position, hated Christianity, wanted nothing to do with it. And one summer, there'd been a kind of family reunion at a chateau in France back in the days when we could have family reunions in France. And he'd taken my book on holiday. And at one point, his sister had come in and gone, oh, what are you reading? And he'd just shown her, and she'd picked it up, opened it at random. And he said, whatever page she read, she laughed out loud about halfway down it, because it's supposed to be quite funny. And she's like, can I borrow this? And he went, yeah, okay. Well, she reads the whole thing in 24 hours flat, and then wants to buy her own copy. And he said to me, this has now started a conversation. And he said, you don't get the significance of this, Andy. For the first time in 25 years, I now have a foot in the door to begin talking about faith, and that book did that. So thank you. So I would be excited if the same thing happens with this next book, that it starts conversations where there wouldn't be conversations. It gives confidence where there is none. And ultimately, I would love it to lead some people to just discover that actually the God of the Bible is unique. There is nobody like him. There is nobody like him who has done the action and history that he's done in and through Jesus when he stepped into space and time and history, and it draws people to take a look at him. And that's where the book ends. It ends in chapter 9 unapologetically with an invitation for people to come on home to the God of the Bible as revealed to them in Jesus. And if just one person, wrote to me to say, that was my experience of reading the book and it led me to make that commitment to follow Christ, I would be happy, because it's not about, joking aside, it's not about selling kind of books or any of that stuff. Trust me, writing books is not glamorous. It's just doggedly hard work. But if it is used by God to change some lives, that makes it all worthwhile.
Well, thank you for talking to us. That's really, really interesting. I do hope that's given a kind of a good flavor to everybody, the kind of things that they'll find in the book and that people will be interested in going and finding it. So final question then, Andy, if somebody watching this does want to go and find the book, where should they go? How can they actually get their hands on a copy?
Great question, Gavin. There are 3 ways you can get hold of the book. There are 3 ways. If you are a supporter of Solas. Solas is supported by hundreds of folks across the country and to a lesser extent around the world who give us a small amount each month and make what we do possible. We're hugely grateful to you. If you are one of those people, you should have or shortly be getting an email from us, and we've managed to arrange to get some copies of the book early from the publisher and at a slight discount. So you can get your hands on a signed copy potentially a couple of weeks early in the UK, and maybe even more than a couple of weeks early in the USA and Canada. So look out for that email, and if it hasn't come by perhaps beginning of March, do feel free to reach out to us and we'll let you know how you can get a copy of the book through us. Secondly, if you're not a supporter of Solas, but you love what we do and would like to make more of what we do possible, again, you can sign up as a supporter for as little as £3 a month. Go to the Solas website or follow the link in the sort of notes for this video. And if you sign up to support us, we will send you a copy of Do Muslims and Christians Worship the Same God as a gift. And if you like it signed, I will happily sign it. That adds, I think, 10p to the value of the book. So there's an investment for you. But we'll do that as our gift to you. And then thirdly, if you just want to buy it in the normal way, then look out for the paperback, the ebook, and they're even doing an audiobook this time round, and it's available wherever books are sold. So get it through, an online Christian bookstore, get it through one of the other, big chains, wherever it is pretty easily available. And as I say, print, ebook, or audiobook, whatever you prefer.
Thanks, Andy. There will, of course, be all details on that you'll be able to find on the SOLAS website when the book is published. And we are at www.solas-cpc.org. Everything that you've heard about today, you'll be able to find out on our website, and links to where you can get hold of the book. Well, thanks for talking to us, Andy. Enjoyed that a lot. And hopefully people will be interested in going a bit further with this subject. Thanks.
Brilliant. That's been great, Gavin. Thanks for taking the time. Bye now.
Cheers. Bye.